What's behind the curtain? It's gotten cold again. Ooh, cold. And this is about the fourth attempt. This morning I got on no problem, but I kept putting interesting titles like this is the first of 5 waves, this isn't the new normal. There's never been a normal, all we've known is slavery, pretty much. And the window of opportunity I keep talking about is to wake up, to be conscious, to be responsible, and not to be sheeple. Now, there are many great brothers and sisters who are heralding the call. And that's a good thing, right? And there have always been brothers and sisters who have heralded the call. That's why we are still in the illusion instead of in the take the red pill or the green pill, or the blue pill, whichever pill, right? And but it's becoming more and more aware that they're not hiding it anymore. There is no difference between one party or the another, or one philosophy or another. It's all the frigging same. It's all behind the close the door. Don't let them see. Don't let them see. Oh, don't let them see. But it doesn't matter because we already can see. The only door, the only curtain is our own self bias, our own beliefs, our own prejudice. That is what's keeping us from seeing the truth. So you're sitting at home, you're being self-prisoned, and you haven't worked in 5 weeks, and the large corporation that you work for, they got $1 billion, but they haven't given you a penny, and you've applied for unemployment insurance, but that hasn't come through because you're told that if you get your unemployment insurance, you'll be making more than you would if you were working, and that isn't fair. Only the rich can do that. And the rich they're imprisoned also. In their own self-loathing, You think Carrot Head's happy, living on a diet of Burger King? Really? KFC buckets? I wonder how many he's got in the closet. They plowed so much food into the ground, poured so much milk out. But, in a way, that's good. It's just like there's nobody driving around. So our cities, the air is cleaner, the water is cleaner than it ever has been, right? Again, this is giving you a ticket to the front seat, seeing what it really is, But this is just the first wave, right? They're going to semi-loosen up. But, most of the world hasn't, they've been out and about, their stores are open, their farms are growing, but because they don't have the boots on the ground to really, all they can do is give, 24/7 fear bait on what is called news, The more they do that, the more in your, because you got three brains back there in your cerebral cortex, You got your reptile brain, your insect brain, and your mammalian brain, and they're all kind of going, and they all have a wire triggered to the fight or flight, your adrenaline, whether you're going to take the bait. Well, so far, the last 26,000 years, we've pretty much taken the bait. But, this is their last grasp because they had to play this fine line of giving enough information, giving enough sense of freedom, giving enough, materialism to keep you down on the farm. But it has made enough of you semi-aware. Now, a lot of you, you're aware, but you are, connected to, a prejudice. You are a white male and, you're making 22,000 a year, barely alive, and you're scared that that Mexican's going to take your job. Well, forget the Mexican. It's the robot's going to take your job, right? AI is going to take your job. The whole film of the Terminator, was a metaphor because that robot ain't going to kill you. You're going to kill each other, That robot's just going to make the crap that you were on the assembly line destroying, having your life so miserable that they had to put nets around the top of the building so he couldn't jump off, right? How many are on the assembly line, who have been in those meat packing, how many, have died from heart attacks of standing, flying by. I mean, I worked in a poultry, mill, where they have 8 trillion chickens in little cages, right? And, the food went by on a conveyor belt, and their poop fell through the cage and went down where they scooped it out and turned it into ammonia to make more corn, to make more feed. So it's this vicious sixth circuit, and all the chickens were just pumped up with antibiotics and God knows what else, and in a totally, alien environment. And the only thing that didn't kill them was that those chickens were so exposed to every kind of toxin that their immune system was pretty good, and they were given the antibiotics not to basically make them healthy, but to make them fat. So, and then they'd either be making eggs until they couldn't, and then they'd be slaughtered, for KFC. And I was living in, I had been brought to Cornell, and I had been my friend who brought me up, she was part of the New Age crowd, Mary, and she was a graduate of Cornell. And, her husband was a MK Ultra computer programmer, and he was brought up on a chicken farm. So he looked like a chicken. Everybody who works on a chicken farm actually looks like a chicken, you know? And Mary brought me up, because she's my bud, and I had known her from Pumpkin Hollow, which is the Theosophical retreat in upstate New York. And also knew her at the UN, and I also knew her through the Blue Door. And my friend who published Whole Life Expo, or the Whole Life Times, and he produced the Whole Life Expo. And I had been at a number of those, and I had filmed it for him, and I had been on panels, right, speaking about all that I speak about, alternative technology and what I had seen out there in the Southwest, in Los Alamos and Kirkland and San Dias and other places out there. And from my experiences through my mentors, right? And my exposure to Tesla technology. So that's where I met Mary. And so, and she would come whenever she was in New York, she would kind of visit me at whatever abandoned building I was. And it was always like a posh, amazing thing. Yes, it was in a terrible neighborhood. I'd meet her at whatever meeting she went to. We'd get in a cab, we'd drive to the abandoned building. We'd go into the secret entrance and go up. Like I took her to when I lived in the Supreme Court building in the South Bronx that had been closed down when New York went bankrupt. And it had been, it had its own subway stop. So we got off at 92nd Street and walked on that little workman's thing in the tunnel up about to the next station, which was 100 and something street where the Supreme Court building was. And Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard or off it a ways. And, they had their own station, but they closed it down when they closed down the thing. But the door to go in there, that revolving door, all it took was me to pick that lock at the base, and it revolved. And all it took for me was to flip the switch, and all the electricity. So the elevators worked, everything worked, the pumps, the ventilation, everything worked, the lights, the plugs, everything worked. The gas was on. The gas was there, it wasn't locked up. So the heat worked, and they had a beautiful kitchen and a dining room. So we had all kinds of great parties, and everything was mahogany and marble. Anyway, so Mary, she loved those excursions, right? So she saw what I was doing. And then when I got involved in housing, and then ended up working for the New York Housing Authority, and I got shot. That's when she came and got me, She had me, threw me in a car, and drove me upstate. And her job at Cornell was the person who, she was the person in charge of figuring out what students would be going to school there, especially in the dynamics of things to come. And it reminded me of that film, Things to Come. And again, the guys who start with a B, they must have put some kind of auto suggestion for me to always forget the names of those guys. But it always comes back at Cornell with her and her husband. She had just married, and it was right in 1980. It was the New Age scene. She was one of the people who was in Brazil, studying the folks in the Amazon. And she came over crystal mines, and she was bringing crystal back, right? And just large, she was one of the first people to bring it back. And she had sold it at malls, and she didn't get big stores that she had to pay rent. She went to the mall owners and listen, I want to put little kiosks out in the main thoroughfare, right? And they hadn't started doing that. And she said, I'll pay you, just to put a little wagon there and, and a place where I can roll it in and lock it up when I'm not there, pay $100 a month. And they thought, well, we're not making any money off of that space as it is. So sure, 100 a month, yeah, for a little wagon, not a problem. So she went around and got 100 of these things and found new age girls at universities or high schools to run them in these towns that had malls. And in the first year, she made, after bringing in the courts, having it sized, having it packaged, she had a guy build these nice little carts and finding the girls and paying them. She made a cool $1 million the first year. And she didn't share it with her husband or even tell her husband about it. I knew about it because she wanted me to turn her on to my rainbow friends who were quartz guys, right? Who were crystal people, right? Crystal healers, right? I know all these crystal healers in the new age scene. So I turned around to that. She did this. She had them. I mean, she was paying everybody, and still she made a cool $1 million the first rigging year, right? And that was, in 1984, and she took me to Cornell in 88. So she was, a millionairess, right? So when the 86 savings and loan collapse happened, there were a whole bunch of farms because the whole Cornell is in the Finger Lakes, and it's the most beautiful dairy, bucolic mountain area. And it's like the beginning of where the Blue Ridge Mountains kind of started. And when the Ice Age left, it left the Finger Lakes. And the Finger Lakes are pretty big, If it wasn't for the Great Lakes, they would be the Great Lakes. But, there's Seneca and Watauga, and there's 5 of them, I think. One starts with an S where the women's movement started, and also the anti, nukes movement, when the Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, W.H., and Ronnie Reagan were bringing the Persian missiles to sit on the doorstep of Russia, which would deliver hydrogen bombs. When they pushed a button in Europe for the Persians to, it would take no more than 5 minutes to go from Turkey and all the places right on the border to hit Russia's major cities and military sites with hydrogen bombs in 5 minutes. I mean, the Russians would have if we launched, they would have no real warning. The only thing they could do is launch their submarine missiles at America, right? And Europe. And we'd have Armageddon. And that's what Ronnie was threatening Russia with. But to go from the contractors onto the boats to take in the airplanes to take them because they were very mobile. They didn't have to go. They weren't big. They could be put on aircraft. The linchpin, these women start an encampment, Seneca, maybe, right there on the railroads. And they camped out on the railroad tracks so the trains couldn't bring the missiles in and, barricaded the road so they couldn't be trucked in and made a big stink. And Mr. Rumsfeld got on board one of those trains along with Dick Cheney and ran over a bunch of women, killed about 6 of them, and about 12 of them lost their legs and arms. And that didn't hit, the major media. It wasn't in the New York Times. I was living up there at the time, and I had a number of friends in that camp. So anyway, that was the Finger Lakes, that was Ithaca, and that was, Mary. And Mary was, so in 86, when the economic collapse happened, she bought a farm, a 500-acre farm with a beautiful big farmhouse and barns and a milking, barn for about 100 cows and a big thing and a couple of silos and you know, at in the 50s that was a pretty. Because the road that she was on, there were about 8 other you know dairy farms, and milk was these guys were just dumping their milk, and it was and they were killing their cows just like they are today, and that's why milk went from like 48 cents a gallon to $2 because the production in upstate New York kind of died out. But anyway, she bought this farm for 48 grand. It had been sitting holler for nothing. And her husband, even though he was mind controlled widget computer programmer at Cornell, wanted to outdo his father as a farmer, right? His father had been a chicken farmer. So her husband, Mary's husband, she married him for 3 reasons. This guy, I mean, the 6 months I was there, whenever she was there, and she wasn't there that often, the 6 months I was there, she was there maybe 4 weeks because otherwise she was out of the country at meetings, at conferences, all over the place, and overseeing her crystal empire, and so every night, the 4 or 5, 6 weeks that she was stooped for hours. This guy he was like the Energizer bunny, and you could hear the bed banging against, and I was in another part of the house, and I could still hear her moaning and crying in the bed going boom, 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 boom. And so that was reason number one, she married this guy. Number two, he was always going to follow whatever she said because she had cash, she had none. He wanted to have this farm. She bought it for him. He, whatever the bills, she paid him. But he was a real skinflint, meaning he bought all used equipment from these farmers, and he was a motorhead. He rebuilt everything. So the last time that farm had any wiring was in the 1950s, and most of the wiring was from the 1920s. The only modern-ish thing was the central, drop from the utility line, and that was a 400 amp 3-phase service to a big Federal Pacific distribution panel, which was the guy who put that in did a great job. Well grounded, still in great shape. It was built in a concrete, kind of bunker with a wooden metal roof, and no water or any kind of schmutz got into it. So, the meter outside, it had a 10-point meter on the power line that the utility company kept in shape, and the lines coming in were 2-aught, 4 2-aught, which was more than code even asked for. So it had a real good 400 amp 3-phase, could power anything, right? So I basically dropped new lines to every building, put new, brand new, Federal Pacific and no, I didn't use GE panels and Square D panels, where they were, where it was a 200 amp service. I put a Square D, and all the sub panels were cheaper GE, and I rewired the house. I rewired. He had a barn that I turned into his mechanic barn because it had a high range and a big, heavy thing that he could put, a genie hoist and a chain hoist on, so he could lift transmissions and engines out of tractors and harvesters. And he could. It was that barn was big enough to have 2 tractors and 2 harvesters, right? And he bought these things that were, 1960, Mercy Ferguson and International Harvester, and he bought himself a backhoe and a small Caterpillar D3, so he could do anything. And so one of the reasons why this um, farm did poorly was where it grew its corn for the cows. If the rain to dryness was perfect, they had good yield. But if it rained too much, it sogged it out and it had poor yield. So that's why I learned about French drains, right? He put French drains everywhere. And anyway, so I wired, and all his buildings were right on that road, right? And there were, like I said, 8 dairy farms. This was a dairy farm road. It was perfect, right? And each farm was about somewhere between 200 and 800 acres for the cows to graze and to grow corn for feed. And it did really well up until the 80s, right? And that's when BHS, or that additive to cows, so the industrial cow milking took over, and the cost went down and bankrupted all those guys, except for 4. For 4 guys who had been doing it long enough, owed nobody any money, didn't buy anything new, didn't borrow any money. So when, the 86 collapse happened, they were fine, right? And they had moved half into beef cattle, which they were doing pretty good with. And they had big enough farms where they were growing other things other than corn and hay for the cows. And so they had diversified enough and they were selling their hay. They had big trucks to take their hay down to the big horse farms down in Kentucky, and they had really good hay, right? So they were making like $25 a bale for this really good hay, right? And they had other diversified, so they were doing pretty good. But still, maybe a third of their thing, they had really good cows that weren't on any drugs, or very, like organic cows, and they were making cheese there, which they were doing pretty good with. So, I rewired this guy's everything, right? And it was right on the main road, so anybody going up and down that road saw me on telephone poles and sides of buildings and ripping things apart and having stuff all over the place, and bringing this whole farm that had been fallow back to life. So I had done that, and my job at Cornell was really a really great job, because I had a little Carol. I had a boss who never bothered me, and he gave me assignments to do research on things, right? And they have a library and access to the internet in the 80s. They were one of the major information hubs of the military industrial complex. You go to any national laboratory, there's a Cornell Avenue or Boulevard. Cornell is. So anyway, Chicago, Cornell, and Stanford are the 3 major. Brookings, that's the name of those guys I work for, Brookings. Anyway, so I would get these projects to research, and do general research of, whenever you start a study, you have to look at what other people have done before you, right? That's the smart thing to do. And I would go all the way back to the Greeks, right? And look in deep. And I had friends still at the UN and still at Trinity and other universities that on the internet. So I had this little Carol that had, my own little keyboard and my own 2 screens, and I could do anything. Plus, because Mary's husband was Mr. Computer, he had a dedicated line to his house. They were just starting to put fiber optics in then, and there was one in, main line coming from, Canada, upstate, and where else, right down the road, so he got them to bring a frigging fiber optic. He had a server and a fiber optic line in like 1988 in that farm. So I had my room. He put in a nice. They used to call them, what are they called? Columns, or Anyway, that was on a frigging fiber optic line. I mean, I had better internet reception then than probably most people have now, and so and it was pretty secure too, and so I was and so he was Mr. Programmer, Mr. Hardware, and so he set me up, and he had protocols in my little column that I didn't have to do anything except hit one button, and I would contact this person or that person, and it would be relatively secure. And so I had pretty interesting access to information. Plus, he had a 9-meter freaking satellite dish that he was sucking up everything. We used to watch. So he had, a satellite, not just the thing that you have in your remote control, but he could dial in virtually any satellite that was on his neck of the sky. And he could dial it down. He could dial down, like, he was a real sports freak. So he loved baseball. And he would dial down the feed from a baseball game. And so they got like 30, 40 cameras out there, right? Well, all those feeds go back to, over the satellite truck, back to, the main distribution point, where that's where the director is pushing the buttons, not there in the truck. And so they get all 20 something, cameras, right? And everything's on. So he had a server hooked up to a satellite dish so he could download anything and put it on that server and watch it later. And so he would watch whole, baseball games and football games, hockey. He also liked hockey. And he'd watch all friggin' 27 screen. He had this room with 40 TV sets, and so he was, and he thought all of his wife's friends were, useless pieces of crap. But I rewired his everything. I made him so he could wire up. Why I got a really nice computer in my room was that I wired his everything so he could have all that stuff in his house, right? And he could do his work. He didn't have to go to Cornell. He hated going to Cornell. He thought all those people were stuck-up, snob, rich guys who were just, he hated scholastics. He thought of himself as superior to everyone because he was Chicken Man. And he thought I was cool because I rewired his everything. And so I helped him do all, that backbreaking thing of putting in French drains. You kind of need another guy. We grew, all of the good seeds came in the air. And when I was there in one spring, half of his area was this amazing grass that you could sell for $25 a bale. So I helped him, cultivate it and harvest it, and he grew a bunch of corn. I helped him grow that, and I sold it. I found outlets. So he thought I was an okay guy, right? And the fact that he got drunk every freaking night, I would put him to bed. He would get to a point where he was, and instead of getting upset or freaked out, I would just, I handled worse than that when I worked for the Housing Authority of New York. So, and that's why Mary liked me. She knew I would do all of this. And, watch out for her husband, retool the farm, and watch her back at Cornell. And, so it was great for her. So for 3 years, it was all good, except he got drunk. And one time he got drunk and we were bailing the stuff, and he wanted to go watch the World Series, and he was going way too fast. And I was on, the baler was popping out these bales, and I had these hooks, and I was stacking the bales on a trailer behind the baler, and he was going so fast, I put one down, and another one came. I didn't even see it, and knocked me down. And before I could get up, the bales buried me. And the best I could do was situate them so I wouldn't get crushed. I got knocked down, and a few fell down, and I couldn't get up fast enough. So all the best I could do was rearrange them so when they came down, they wouldn't crush me. And I knew that he would notice at some point that I wasn't up there on the trailer. So he went up and down, and it wasn't until the bales started falling off and he'd come around again, and the bales weren't on the trailer. But he was drunk because he was drinking whiskey and beer. He had a cooler on the tractor, and which most of these frigging guys did, because it's boring going up and down and up and down, so they get drunk. And when I worked as an EMT, when I moved into Roanoke, and then Varna, and got that job with all the girls in the fire department, and was an EMT, we went to a number of farm incidents, and this one, and so there's complicated machines, harvesters and balers and all kinds of things, run off of what is the PTO. It's the tractor in where the transmission for the big driving wheels has a power takeoff, PTO, right? And it runs the equipment, right? So it doesn't have to have its own motor. It runs off the motor of the tractor. So the thing gets jammed, or you need to clean it or clear it, or anyway, these guys normally are drunk, and they don't want to stop the engine, disconnect the power takeoff, clear out the gook, right? And that's why farming is one of the most dangerous jobs in America, because these machines, these guys take off all the safety equipment, right? So these, blades and chains are like flying around, and they get a hold of you, they suck you right in. And that is one of the reasons why today, most farm equipment farmers don't own. They basically give the corporation a big chunk of money. They deliver the machine, and then they have to pay like rent on it, right? And you're thinking you're going to own it, but never. And when you sign that contract, you sign a contract that you do not touch that machine. Like this guy, he took everything apart, fixed it, put it back together. Today's farmer doesn't do that. International Harvester basically sends a man out, because virtually everything on that machine is run by a computer, not by a widget, right? And so they just take out a module and plug in a new one, and you can't go buy that module, right, or fix it, right? If you do, you get in trouble, right? And so that's what's going to happen to everyone, because no one's going to own a car. It's all going to be, everything's going to be an app, right? When I worked for the Desperate Lawyers and then died in a plate of spaghetti and came back, and I called up a few of my clients 4 or 5 years later saying, "Hey, I'm back. Oh, we thought you died." I said, no, that was, over advertised. I'm still here. Don't you have something for me to do? Because they always had something for me to do. And they said, "Oh, no, sorry, Al. We have replaced you with an app." And law has been totally replaced by algorithms. And so is medicine. And these things, law, medicine, transportation, food, and shopping, the corporate folk like Billy Micropenis wants, they call it legacy normal being brought to us by this pandemic. Everything's going to be on your smartphone, your face will be your money, your face will be the blockchain, right? And if they don't like that face, well, you can't buy nothing, right? And Billy Micropenis has put forth a new blockchain algorithm, and it's called Micropenis 6606. Don't take the mark of the beast, 666. Anyway, and that's coming down the line. And, Anthony, and, if you watch MSNBC, um, the MS on MSNBC is Microsoft, right? So yes, they kind of got out of that business, but they're not. There's, the media is speaking for the corporate, and Billy Micropenis and Larry, Armstrong, who sells you everything by robots. No more people in those warehouses, and everything's being delivered. You forget the postal service. We're going to have our own, drones, bring it straight to your front door. A lot safer that way, because humans, they're just a petri dish of pestilence. We had to cut down those numbers, and so we have to really make sure humanity is, socially stressed. Because what causes, those micro blooms in our um, system is stress, and those are those nasty, nouveau riche 19s, and that's where that shit's coming from. Now, I don't know anything. I'm just a storyteller, you know. So, about the fourth month, I'm working at Cornell. Mary's husband is happy as a clam. He's drunk every night. He's doing his work from home, and his boss loves that because he's very productive. And he's drunk all the time. And so anyway, he nearly crushes me, right? And so he goes up and down, and then when he comes down, he's starting to run over these bales, and he stops, and he's like really pissed off. He thinks that I jumped off the wagon and went in to do something in the house, like get a sandwich or something. So he drives the tractor up there, and I'm, yelling, but he can't hear over the tractor, and he's drunk, right? So he drives, up the hill, and he hasn't filled the gas tank in a couple of days. So he drives up the hill, and as he's driving up the hill, the gas runs, so his truck, the engine stops because he runs out of gas, because half the gas is what's left in the tank is going past the pipe that sucks the gas out. And the engine stops, and he's like cursing, and he's like walking up towards the house, and I'm yelling, and he's so drunk, he doesn't hear, he's like gonna tell me what for. And he gets up there and he can't find me. So he comes back to the tractor. By this time, he's not, jumping up and down. He can't find me. He doesn't know where the heck I am. He's starting to get a little concerned, and maybe he ran me over or something. Anyway, when I see him coming through a little hole in the bales, and he's right there, hey, moron, I'm underneath the bales. You went so fast. Oh man, I'm so sorry. So he kind of, got up there with the hooks and, got me out. And he said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't tell Mary. I said, no, don't worry about it. No one died. I said, you're lucky that first one didn't knock me out, because the next ones would have crushed me. I was at least able to build myself a little. Anyway, so he said, well, the game's on. So we went to the house, right? And he was a pretty good cook. He was a grill master. And so I still had teeth in those days. And so he had grilled up some really nice steaks the night before. And so he made some serious steak sandwiches. And so, we had a bunch of that. And he had made some he was really I'm a pretty good cook, but he was the grill master. And the things that he had made, his mother taught him, like potato salad, amazing. Coleslaw, amazing. We had corn. We had a ton of corn. We had all the sweet corn. And because he bought the wrong thing, so we had cows. So I said, the sweet corn, you could just eat it, So, and he had pickled that. And so he was a pretty good pickler. He could take any vegetable and pickle it. And he got into kimchi. This is the first time I really got into kimchi. And in actuality, he was a pretty nice guy. And the fact that I never got pissed off and did all this amazing stuff for him and really didn't charge him any money, um, you know, he was pretty friggin' amazed. And so, you know, so he was happy with me, you know, and the fact that he nearly killed me, and I've saved his life a number of times, you know, and he would vomit. He had a you know, and when he get really drunk, and if I went to sleep, I didn't get up a few times and check him out, he would have, you know, aspirated his own vomit. So I saved his life a few times, and he was, you know, you know, so and luckily, you know, I had been, you know, worked at the VA, you know, and I had been, you know, uh, the bedpan guy, basically, who cleaned people up. Before I became the alternative medicine guy, I was the bedpan guy. And so, you know, I helped, you know, clean a lot of people who were on ventilators. And I'd be there when the nurses and the doctors didn't, you know, were doing something else. And, you know, we'd get them off the ventilator, clear out their airway, get them breathing, you know. And now that wasn't my job. I wasn't a respiration therapist, you know. But I hung around with them enough to, you know, and I helped them do that a number of times, and I knew what to do. Like I knew what to do, you know. I could. One time, the guy was choking so bad, and I couldn't clean it out. I actually cut him an airwave, and that's way past my, you know, bedpan paycheck. And that's about when my the colonel who's head this place kind of came in and said, "You know, Al, you're going to be my protege." I said, "What? How can I be I'm a freak." You know, I had really long hair. I rode a motorcycle. I had leather jacket, mirrored sunglasses, cowboy hat, cowboy boots, and, you know, maroon shorts, you know, and lemon tank tops, you know. This was the 70s. And so he said, "No, no, you're the man." So that's where I became Mr. He sent me off to all these great healers, and I studied with them. So, so I was, you know, more educated than the average bear. So I saved that guy's life a number of times, and so he liked the fact, you know, he considered me a friend, right? His only friend. He had no friends, you know. Mary would come every other week, or every 2 weeks, or every 3 weeks, and he'd just slam her boots off, you know, until she was satisfied, and then she would go up and do something else. And I was making sure he didn't get in trouble, he didn't die, he didn't get fired, he didn't, you know. And so Mary liked the fact I was there. So I was redoing everything, you know. He wanted to watch the World Series, so he was going to quit anything. So he made me an amazing 3 or 4 of these amazing steak sandwiches, cut real thin, you know, amazing bread. There was a great bakery in town. I would bring back this bread, and he had all these pickled. Oh, it was exquisite. I mean, we could have started a restaurant in town if he had the personality. Anyway, because he couldn't work with people, you know, he couldn't even keep him in the kitchen. But anyway, so and he liked Italian food, which I would cook that, and he would cook the steak, right? So we were, you know, an odd couple, but we basically got along as good as. And he was neater than a pin. I mean, anal retentive like it. So we went to watch. You know, you know, I didn't like hold it against him that he nearly killed me. And so we went in, and he turned on the satellite dish, and he dialed in the World Series, and we were watching on like 40 TV. You know, every different camera was on a different TV set, and he had a big projection one of what was coming off the network feed. And so we had we both had lazy boy chairs, and we're sitting in our lazy boy chairs and our TV dinner trays, and stack of these amazing sandwiches. And you know, he also was a pretty good um, purveyor of whiskey. He could make that, and he had his own still. And so we were getting pretty lit, and I had found people who were making other party favors. And so, by the time the show came on and he was all dialed in, we felt no pain, right? So, and he had an amazing sound system, like stereo, phonic, everything for the TV. And so it was a real sound because they had they had more than just mono coming over the satellite. So we're watching this show, and the movie, it starts going. It's I don't know what inning, fourth, fifth. So we are feeling no pain. We are well fed. We are happy. Everything is perfect. We're in our lazy boys, and then the shaking start happens, and we look at the TV screens, and one of the cameras, which was like a long telephoto, so they had this big long lens on it, so they had a weight on it, so the camera wouldn't, it was like a seesaw, and the weight was they probably had the heaviest guy on that camera, and so anyway, the weight on the camera was in the favor of the back end of the camera, right? So if it was going to go anywhere, it was going to go up, not down. So we're watching it, and things start shaking in the house, but they're shaking on the TV screens, and the different cameras are getting things, and people are rocking and rolling in the stadium, and the lights. One of the cameras, telephoto cameras, the guy must have fallen off the boom, and the camera went up, and it focused right at the big tower lights, and they were whipping back and forth in a cycle, like a fishing rod. But these things were like 120 feet tall with 40 gigantic floodlights, and they were going back and forth, and one snaps and flies over out into the parking lot, and we're watching this, and the house is shaking, and we are freaking out, and then everything, the signal goes dead, right? And we run outside, and coming up from the nearest Finger Lake is a water spout coming across, thunderstorm water spout coming across at Finger Lake, hits the ground and starts coming straight at us. And as it's coming up this hill towards us, and it's about 6, 7, 10 miles away, it's shooting trees out the side. And wherever there's a house nearby, the trees are flying through it, and the roofs are getting ripped off. And we are drunk out of our minds. And this place, there are no tornadoes in upstate New York. At least, there was no tornado basement. He did have a root cellar, I guess we could have gotten in. But it was really super hot, and we were drunk out of our minds. And we were both wearing shorts and sweating like pigs and bare-chested. And we both grab each other and go, ah, right? And the tornado's heading right for us. And we're not moving. We're just screaming this is it. I'm going to die in the arms of this crazy guy, right? And he smells like formaldehyde because he would clean everything because his father cleaned their chicken farm with formaldehyde. So he cleaned everything with formaldehyde. So this guy smelled like formaldehyde. Oh, there's the dog. I'm going to let him greet the people at the door. Scare them away. Anyway, it's coming right towards us, and that's right where the hill gets steep coming up the house. And that water spout hits it in such a way where it bounces up into the air. And it goes right over us. And we're looking straight up into a tornado, zipping around. And it's about 500 feet over our heads. And it's calm as day, right? And it goes right past our, where we are, where the house was, where the barns were, where everything that thing hit it would have torn everything up. And it flies over and smashes into a forest in the not in his property, but the next guy's property, and it kind of tears up some trees and then bounces up again, and goes God knows where, further down into the county, right? And we drop to the ground, and our adrenaline is pumping like you can't believe, and we and the electricity's off, and everything's right. Anyway, so we go back and we kind of finish our whiskey, and we are now relatively sober, right? So we decide it's like maybe 6, 7 o'clock, but it's in the middle of summer, still somewhat sunny. So we decide to get in. He's got one of those motorized 4-wheel drive golf cart things. Before ATVs were invented, they had these kind of things. And he had these tricycle things that were like motorcycles. And so I got in the 4-wheel one, he got in the tricycle thing, and we kind of took a little purvey around the farm. And nothing really, where the thing came up the hill, it kind of messed, but it was just dirt, There was nothing even grown in that 40 or 50 acres. Oh, the sun's coming out. That's good. What time is it? Oh, it's 12:02. And I've been talking for 57 minutes. So when it hits 60, I'm going to go have lunch and see how the dog is. So tonight at 6 p.m., I'm going to do a guided meditation, right? And that's how it goes. So anyway, I'll try and finish the whole story up. So that was that. And I was still working on stuff on his farm. And because he wanted me to wire up so he could have milking machines. There was an old milking machine from 1960 there, but it was trash. So I took it apart, saw what could be salvaged, what could work, where I could get parts for it, blah, blah, blah. And I talked to a couple of the other farmers that I'd driven up there and said, hey, they had met Mary and her husband, and they thought he was weirder than weird. And they had kind of known that. They had chicken farmers. We're cow farmers. I said, yeah, but, Anyway, so I fixed a few things for those old guys. And then one of these old guys, who was the most prosperous of the cow farmers who were left, and he had 2 younger sons in there. One was in his 40s, the other was in his 30s, and they were really trying to set, since they had no real competition, they were trying to do, smart farming. And they both had gone to Cornell and learned the science of farming, where their dad was just, seat of the pants, learned it from his father and his father's father. Anyway, so those 3 guys show up in their nice truck, and I really had no vehicle. I got to ride around in Mary's crappy little Toyota. No, she had a Honda, like early Honda from the early 70s. So anyway, it's just basically a motorized roller skate. Anyway, so these guys came down and said, so are you the farm electrician, the guy, you rewired this whole place, and you talking to the other farmer guys, and you're trying to rebuild this guy's milking stall? I said, yeah, right. And he said, well, we got a problem. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah. So what's the problem? He goes, well, we have about 300 milking cows, which was most milking cows in that county, right? The other guys had maybe 50, 60, if that, right? So this was a big operation. And those cows, like I said, these guys were the top of the line. They had like organic cows. Each cow was probably worth, $15,000, $20,000. They were making cheese there that they were making contracts, and, so they weren't a hard place to sell their milk or use their milk. And I said, so what's the problem? I said, well, the cows won't hook themselves up to the machine. And see, most cows love the milking machine because they have all this milk, and if they don't have little guys sucking on the tit, they'll explode. They actually will explode. So they had twice a day they get milk by this machine. It's like, oh yeah, oh wow, yeah, that. And so I go up there with my little Megger, which is, Grandpa still gave me this thing, and it was a device, old Tesla age, 1910 device that picked up EMF and other, frequencies, other waves, right? And it picked it up in the waveform. You didn't have to touch, like an ohm meter. You had to put leads on the circuit. Not this. This could. And today at Lowe's they sell these little wands that pick it up, beep 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 beep. Right. Well, this was like that, but this was finely tuned, and it doesn't just go beep 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 saying that there's current there. It had a meter that told you the level of the current, the amperage of the current, the whole ball of wax of everything about the current, and whether it was AC, DC, or other frequencies, radio, microwave. This thing was a pretty interesting little tool. And I've never found, Grandpa Stoll gave it to me. He said, here, because I was doing repair work for him, and it was an amazing tool to figure out what went wrong with the machine very clearly. So I said, okay, let me get my little bag of tricks. And I had a bunch of other interesting little devices that I had made myself and gotten from other places that really could help you, troubleshoot any electrical machine, right? Especially manufacturing machines, right? So anyway, so it's got hundreds of machines and sensors and stuff doing stuff, and you really can't figure out the flow unless it's a digital device that has software in it that tells you exactly what's wrong with it, right? Well, in the 80s, didn't have too much of that. So anyway, so I got my little bag of tricks, and they took me up to their farm, and I went around and looked at all the equipment and measured things, and I said, okay, when did this start? Because, I've been up here 6 months, and you guys, I've seen your truck drive by, and you wave at me, I wave at you. You never stop to talk to me, right? But now, your cows, how long has this been going on? And they said, it's been going on for about a little less than a week. And we got, more than almost 1,000 cows that we have to milk. And right now we're having to do it by hand. And that's like almost impossible. And we have had a number of cows die of utter, septicemia, like they get infected. And we've already lost, $20,000-$30,000 worth of these cows. And we, we've already taken our cows and sent them to, and these other farmers are having the same problem. And no one knows what it is. I mean, we've had other electricians up here because we have a sense that they're getting, because, one of us have gotten shocked. It doesn't happen all the time to us, but it happens all the time to the cows. And I said, well, first of all, you guys wear big rubber boots, right? The cows in the milking thing, they're in mud, their own crap, water, and they got their little hooves in that, right? So they're definitely grounded. So I said, it's been going on about a week. What thing have you noticed different? Has the utility company put in any new power lines? And they go, oh yeah. Over in the North 40, they put a whole bunch of poles, and they paid us. We're going to get $1,100 a year just for letting them do that. And I said, oh, okay, so let's go over there. So I took their nice 4-wheel drive and went over there, and I said, you got a backhoe? And I said, yeah. So we took the 4-wheel drive truck and my little bag of tricks and a backhoe. And what we did was near one of these poles, not right next to it, but near enough between two, we dug a ditch. And because I had been doing all this French trenching, drainage with this guy, Mary's husband, I knew that the whole side of this county was shale, right? So the water just comes down. It's like underground river, right? And I knew that there were other deposits of like copper and all kinds of things because we hit a spring and this guy went and had the water tested and it had all of these electrolytes, copper and iron and all these things that are very good conductors. So I said, guys, what is going on here is that these guys did not ground these poles correctly. And so that high voltage is coming straight into the ground, going through that highly conductive water table and going straight down the hill to your melting farm. So all that water that's coming out of the concrete is carrying the current. And they go, I said, yeah. How do we fix that? I said, not a problem. I said, let's go to the, supply place, right? So go there with his checkbook and we buy like, a couple hundred, 8-foot copper grounding rods and, 2-3 spools of, number 8 copper wire and a bunch of ground lugs and bugs and a couple cans of orange spray paint. I said, so do you have an electric jackhammer? You go, no. I said, so, okay, we'll take one of those, $300 electric jackhammer in Milwaukee. And I go around with my little megger and say, okay. And I hit it with a thing of orange spray paint. And I make about, 80 little dots all over around their buildings and their farms and wherever electric panels are. And I said, so take this jackhammer, this concrete, smash a hole through the concrete, then take that copper rod, take the bit out of the electric jackhammer, stick it on top of it, and we'll pound the rod into the ground, right? And then run, I'm going to take, hit it more orange paint, and you guys run the copper wire, from here and leave a spool about 10 feet, but these nice little, staples, you staple the ground wire along the wooden stuff, and where it's metal, you kind of screw it with these other little things that will hold it against the metal part of the building, right? And I'll come around and terminate everything, right? So, that was one afternoon. I figured out what was wrong, got all the materials, laid it out for them with spray paint, and went on my, they brought me back to, Mary's husband's farm, and it's really her farm. So everything was in her name. Anyway, so, he had gone off someplace, didn't even know I had gone, and then a couple of days later, the farmer guys come back, get me everything. They did a great job, and I just go around and start terminating things and show them how to do it. They terminate the rest, right? And again, I go back. The guy's not there, He didn't even notice I was gone for about 3 or 4 hours. And then I come back, we turn everything back on. Everything is super grounded. There is no stray voltage anywhere. The cows are happy. They're producing, they bring all their cows back and everything's great, right? And it took all of 2.5 days, where the week that they wasted losing $25,000 worth of cows was trying to get different electricians there to look at it, and no one could figure it out. They even got the utility company. Oh, no, it's not our fault. And so basically, I, was done, right? And they patted me on the back, and the guy said, well, what do we owe you? And I said, well, what's it worth to you? And he goes, can we come down and figure it out? And we'll figure it out and we'll bring you a check. I said, yeah, no problem. So next day, dinner time, the guys come down and, the 2 sons and the old guy, and they come down and they said, you are a miracle maker. You are the farm miracle electrician. I said, oh, thank you very much. And they hand me a check for $45,000. And I look at that check and go, And I said, so this is what it's worth to you? And the guy said, no, it's worth 5 times that to us because you saved our bacon. You know, we were right on the edge of like losing it. And, but that's all we got right now. We'll give you more. I said, no. This is, how many hours did I put in? And they said, I don't know. I said, about 10. And the guy goes, it's not the hours. It's what you knew and that you had that magic box. I said, yeah, okay. So I said, I'm not going to say I'm not going to take this. Thank you very much. So, I pulled the check up and Mary's husband's there seeing this and not even understanding what the heck these guys are talking about. And so, I basically put that check in my wallet and, the guys left and they said, you ever need a favor? We owe you one. I said, it was my pleasure. And thank you very much. That's very generous of you, right? So I took it. I didn't say, oh, no, I can't take that. So I only charge $10. No. Well, I did the same thing for Yokel Boy there, a chicken man. And, and didn't charge him a nickel, because Mary saved my life, dragged me out of the Lower East Side and brought me to Cornell and just put me there and put me in the house to watch after her husband. But the electric job I did him, if I was, a licensed electrician up there, I would have charged, or a licensed electrician would have charged him somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000 to do the work I did, right? And so anyway, the guy goes, what was that about? I said, I did some work for those guys. And I didn't say anything more. I didn't go, oh, look at this, $45,000, So I, go down. I had no real money up until then, right? Basically, I belonged to the, state credit union because part of Cornell, their veterinarian school and a couple other their schools are run by the state. So the people who work at Cornell can join up to the, whatchamacallit, the savings and loan there. So I went down with my little check and deposited and nearly knocked those people. Where'd you get that? I said, well, it's, that farming, I did a little work for them and that's what they paid me. And it was like, so they're supposed to not say anything. That's supposed to be confidential information, right? So anyway, but Mary's husband was Mr. Computer Boy, and he not only, did work from home, he did IT for them too, right? He wasn't, but he was, when they would get stuck, he was really good at that stuff. So, and he was working on a whole new system for that school. And anyway, so he was at that bank, and what happened was, so I fixed that, but there were 4 other guys who had cows, not as many as those guys, or had as a big business as those guys, but they were still having that same thing. And so this other, one Saturday, I was, working on something in the barn, and because I had made my own shop, my electric shop, and my own apartment, there was a septic tank in one of these barns, and it had a hay loft that really wasn't used for hay. They had a big hay barn. And so I made an apartment because I got tired of being in that house, listening to that guy snore and crash around the house drunk. And, when Mary was home, hearing them have sex all the time. So I made myself a very nice little apartment. It was summertime too, it was starting to be about, end of May when I, built myself a nice little thing because I got a nice check and I started to buy, set myself up with tools and stuff and put, the computer line out there. I learned enough about how to run a line for my little column out there instead of in the house. And in a lot of ways, the guy liked it that I was not in the house, right? Because he would, do things that he was embarrassed about and he didn't want me to hear. But how could you not when he was so drunk? And anyway, so, I'm out there and I'm working on something. And this other farmer guy, old guy, said, "Are you the miracle farmer electrician?" I said, "I guess I am." He goes, "Bob up there, he told me, what you did for him. Can you do that for me? Is that the same problem I'm having with my building commission?" I said, "I think it is." And he goes, "Well, I can't pay what he does." I said, "Listen, the way I look at it, he paid for all of you, right? And you're all a community, and he's the richest, he's got it going. So whatever you want to give me, you pay for the materials, and you pay me what you can pay me, and I will just leave it at that and be your good neighbor." He goes, "I can't believe a young man like you would do that for me." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You don't know me." I said, "You're my neighbor." He said, "I thought you were squirrely as that boy." I said, "No, no." I said, you are one of us." I said, "I'm very glad that you said that, sir." So I get in his truck. We go up there. I figure it out. He's got guys working up there, younger, and I do the same. We go in his pickup truck. We go to the electric supply place, and we get the grounding rods, and we go borrow the other guy's Milwaukee, and who he was happy to do it, right? And so by me doing that, it put him in good graces with the other guys. And I told him, I said, "I'm not going to charge these guys what you pay me, but you're going to get some good graces because I'm telling them that you are, you know, being the big daddy, you're being a good neighbor, helping them out." And so I endured this kind of brotherhood amongst these four farmers who were they'd known each other for 40, 50 years. And it was almost like the Clampetts and the McCoys, but they weren't that bad. And it endured. When harvest time came around and I was still living there, I hadn't moved into Ithaca yet. We had one gigantic, amazing party that went on for like a week. And, Mary and her hubby showed for like a few hours, and he was so fidgety, he left. Mary stuck for a little longer and tried to endure the good neighborhoodness amongst them. And they were like kidding, "You should have married this guy." And so I wired all those guys' farms. And in the process of doing that, so I kept, because there was one really good electric supply, and the rest were just like hardware stores. But these guys had the real deal. And by the time I did the third farmer, the guy who was the owner of that, he goes, "So, I hear you're a local 3 guy, and you had your license in New York and City, and that means you can get a master's license here in New York State if you had one." "Yeah, I know." He goes, "You want to do that?" I kind of run, the state office here. I said, "You run it and you run the, isn't there a economy?" He said, "Not really. This is the country. It's all good." I said, "Sure, yeah, what do I need to do?" And he goes, "Fill out this form." And I said, "Give me $20, right? You got to mail me." I said, "Yeah, I've got a post office box." "Yeah, that's a good idea. Always have a post office box. Stay the same address forever." I said, "That's right." So, I got a state, New York State, master electrician's license. And then after I got that guy says, "So do you want to have a credit line here?" And I said, "Well, I don't really have a company." And he goes, "You going to start one?" And I said, I work at Cornell, that's actually my job." He goes, "Well, there are a lot of people who would like you to do things for them." And he goes, I want to introduce you to this one guy. We're going to go have lunch with him, right, at the King's Club." The King's Club was this place on top at Ithaca College. It was Cornell and Ithaca College. And they had a school of hospitality. And on top of one of their tall buildings over there, they had this restaurant that was like on the 20 something floor, and it was a club. A rich guy was called, right, and it had this view overlooking the lake, and you could see the mountains and the other lakes. It was a beautiful, beautiful view. Windows all the way around. The only place there weren't any windows were the back that was facing the next county, and it was just forests and farms, and it was pretty, but not like the other, 200 degrees that the dining room faced out on. And that part was the elevators and the lobby and the kitchen. They had a really big, fancy kitchen, right? And the refrigerators and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so I go, yeah, that sounds fun. And so he takes me up there, introduces me to the maitre d', and says, listen, anytime Al wants to come up here, he is my guest. And you have to, serve him as you would serve me. And this guy, he was one of the richer guys of Ithaca. I mean, he owned a bunch of buildings. He was on the board of Ithaca College, and he was, had connects to Cornell, and he owned a lot of stuff. And it was good being his friend. I mean, he was the guy, he was the state official who licensed people. And he said, you want to be, just fill out this form. I got my master's license. So anyway, go to lunch. And we had this nice lunch with about 8 of the richest guys of that county. And, the mayor was sitting over there, and the sheriff was eating lunch with us, and the chief of police and the head of the fire department and EMS, they were all there. We're all having a nice lunch. And the guys who were mostly at the table that this guy were other electricians, 2 other electricians who had the biggest shops in town, and their fathers and their grandfathers. They were like they were like Grandpa Stahl. And one of those guys knew Grandpa Stahl, right? Because he was in the IBEW. So he knew Grandpa Stahl and worked on the Niagara project with Tesla and Grandpa Stahl, right? Mr. Westinghouse. And so, and they're all in their 40s and 50s and 60s, and, I'm 32. Old enough, right? And, and so they were all calling me the magic farm electrician, right? And they all thought that was really funny. And I said, that was pretty smart of you, I said, so any of you guys got a Megger? And this one guy said, yep, my grandfather had one of those, and I have it. And that was Gus Baer. And he had the biggest electric business in the 3 counties. He did hospitals and, right, really big stuff, right? So anyway, we're all talking, we're all nice. And I tell them stories, and I tell them about how I was in rock and roll. And they go, really? And I go, yeah. And they say, Gus was a rock and roll star. And we were surprised that he actually came back, because he was on the road with Elvis and the Beatles, this and that. And Gus was just going, And he goes, when, we went to high school together, he was the dude. He was, had a band that was like played in every, played at Cornell and played, he was, all the girls were after him, and he married the hot, sweet, cheerleader, Mary Sue, and, and we were all, and he was such a nice guy. We couldn't be jealous of him. He was never lauded over us. It was like, and then when he, went away and became, this amazing, famous musician, he was, playing nearby us. He would give us tickets to come hear, Buddy Holly and the Beatles and you name it. And we, he's one of the linchpins of what makes the 3 counties great. I said, okay. Anyway, so, we break up for lunch, and the guy who brought me, who had the big, Mr. Real Estate and owned, the supply house and was the state official, said, Gus is going to take you home. I have to go do something. So he's going to drive you back to where you want to go. And I said, oh, that's nice. We can talk more. So Gus takes me, not, he said, well, you got time to kill? I said, yeah, I got plenty of time. And so he takes me to his shop, right? And he shows me his facility. And he's got like 30 guys working, and he's got an engineering office where all the blueprints of all his jobs are mapped out. And he's very, very fastidious, analytical, precise. Stations, a power transmission thing, and a few other, officey and commercial stuff, right? And he showed me all the blueprints. He goes, I'd really like to hire you. And I say, well, what for? You seem like you got all these guys. He goes, they're all pinheads. I can't, all they know how to do is drill a hole, pull a piece of Romex. There are a couple guys who can bend pipe, but that's about it. But there's nobody who can read a blueprint, who can understand a job, who can, estimate, who can troubleshoot like you did. I need somebody who can troubleshoot like you do. And also, I saw you how you interacted with all those different people at lunch, and you're the kind of guy I need. You're the kind of guy who could talk to the head of the hospital, who could represent, right? And I have a real problem because I have 3 sons, and they're all morons. And we're working on some pretty sophisticated stuff, and they screw it up all the time. You're working on a hospital, and if you do something wrong, people are going to die, and I'm bonded. And if, and I'm getting close, so I need you to go through these jobs and find all the stuff that they've screwed up and fix it. And I said, well, I would have to be able to do it on my time. I would have to be a subcontractor. He said, that's what I want. I said, what? I said, because one of my sons, his wife is my bookkeeper, and she overlords every nickel I spend because she sees it as her money because I'm going to die, and then her son, who's the oldest, will take over the business. And I said, okay, so it's just I'm working for you, not the business, and it's between you and me. He goes, yep. And then he goes, and every Friday, you're going to come to my house, and you're going to come down to my man cave. And that's the first time anyone used the term man cave, right? And so I, said, okay. So we get back in his vehicle, we leave his office, we drive to, and he's got this palatial estate, beautiful house, pool, tennis courts, just, millionaires kind of house. And it was like right out of Hollywood. I said, so you kind of got a taste for this. He said, well, actually, this was my father's house and my grandfather's house. They built it, they liked The Good Wife, Anyway, so okay, that's good. I said, you had no brothers and sisters? No, I was the only child of my father. And, so when and he was amazing because I had this great talent in playing guitar and being a musician and a passion to do it. And he didn't really, say anything except go follow your passion. And I did it for almost 20 years. And I came back. There were lulls during my career, and I would come back and work for my dad. And one of those lulls, I married my high school sweetheart. And, and when I went out again, she actually liked that scene. But as she got older, she got not as, amazingly gorgeous anymore. And then she wanted more money. I mean, we were living comfortable. We were always having a high life. We were, when we were in Las Vegas, we had a great place. And when we were in Hollywood, we had a great place. But after 10 years of that, she wanted to have family, come back, I was pushing 30s, and I got tired of it. And I was playing for the Beatles at Shea Stadium, and as part of their band, because it wasn't just the Mop Tops; they had a backup band, and we couldn't hear ourselves. And I saw more and more that's how rock and roll was going. And I just, felt the same way my wife did. So we came back to Ithaca. My dad was still running the business. He was still in pretty good shape in his, mid 70s. And took back up control. And he retired, went to Florida, had a good 15 years of having, retirement and coming back to this big house. And that's why we built that other little house. So when he and my mom would come back, they would stay in that. It was really comfortable for them. It was right by the pool, and they would play tennis. And they stayed in pretty good shape until my mom got cancer, and then my dad died about a year later. And here I am. Anyway, so he tells me that story as we're driving into the compound. And instead of going to the house or the little house, he drives, and it looks like it's a garage, and we park in front of the garage, and we walk in the garage, and there is this basic concrete, bunkerish hole in the ground, with steps going down, nice thing, and above it says, Gus's man cave, right? So we go down there, and it's a man cave. It's like a cave. It looks like, Hugh Hefner's grotto without the water, and it's got stones all around it. And what's really interesting, he's got big chunks of thick glass, that was glass he got at the glass place in upstate New York. And it was like chunks that they threw away, and they were like greenish kind of, and it was glass that was supposed to be used so you could see into something that was highly radioactive. So it was like basically kept you from exposure to any almost wavelength of radiation, right? EMF, radio, microwave, nuclear, but this nice green light, the way he had it situated, it was like the sun came down, and it also kept out heat. I mean, even though it let light through, it didn't turn his man cave into an oven. So went down there, and it was very black and white tile. It looked like 1950s diner, but it was very much a Masonic black and white kind of thing. And there were other. So I said, "So you are a Mason?" He goes, "Yep." "Are you a Mason?" I said, "Not really." I say, I've been around him. I know him, like you, He said, "Give me the secret handshake." "Well, the lower degree guy." "Yeah, sure. I learned that." And he kind of laughed. He goes, "It's more." I said, "Yeah, what are you, 33? He goes, "No, I'm almost, I'm getting there." And he said, "We're not supposed to talk." I said, "Yeah, buddy, I could tell you stories." And he goes, "Well, we will, because every Friday you're going to come here and I'm going to pay you cash, right? And I assume you like to smoke." And I said, "Yeah, I like to smoke." So, he had a safe. He opened up the safe, and there was, things in there, but he had this metal, and pretty big safe. He had this metal canister, and he took it out, and it was full of bud, right? And he had this, other kind of, not safe, but a very secure locked door. And he opened it up, and he had all kinds of things in there. And he took out this electric hookah that, he put a rum kind of raisin mixture into the water chamber. And every time you drew on it, a little electric thing would ignite the bud. And so we would sit there. "Yeah, this is pretty good." Yeah. And so we would do that. And he had some really nice liqueurs and a very nice kitchen. And we would have little, so Friday, and we would both, no matter where I was, or what, if I was working for him or I was at Cornell, at around 2:00, if I was working for him, he would come and get me, and we would drive back to the, and he had a jacuzzi down there. That is the part of the grotto he did have. mean, this was a party kind of place. And I said, so what kind of parties you had? I said, well, we used to have some pretty great, because he had a stage and he had all of these Gibson guitars that were signed by like George Harrison and the King and you name the rock and roll star. That guitar was given to Gus by that person. It was one of their favorite guitarists that he would play in their band and do such a good job. When he moved on, they would give, that was part of the tradition. He would get a really great guitar signed by those guys. And the Gibson Company made him a bunch of guitars, and a few of the other really well-known guitar guys. And he had amplifiers. Anyway, he had some real antique, amazing. And he said this was actually my father's man cave, and he was named Gus too. So that was the Gus that I said, your father must have been pretty cool. I mean, to grow up in the shadow of your grandfather and then let you go do what you want, your passion was, and wait for you for like 20 years. That's a pretty good dad. He said, oh yeah, he was the best. So every Friday I would go down there and he would pay me an extraordinary good salary, more than, if I was being paid through their company, that woman would have gotten, because I was getting paid like maybe 6 times more than her husband was getting paid, and about 10 times more than the lower rung was getting paid, right? And what I did was I did not really, I said, I worked with your people, and there are a couple of folks there that they're all right, but they are really mediocre across the board. There is, and you're doing some pretty, so what I want to do is, I met this person in the public school system who has, they're trying to get kids who can't go to college but are pretty smart. I mean, they can't go to college because they can't afford it. They can't fit that thing, but they're smart enough to do something interesting. I've, gone and talked to their students about, motivation and blah, blah, blah. And I'd like to take some of those kids and make a crew of excellent electricians. So at some point when I move on, and I'm going to move on, you'll have some really outstanding people. And he goes, that's a great idea. And he said, what I'm going to do is, I know who you're talking about. I'm going to go to that person and set up a program that will be a nonprofit that I can donate money to not only pay their salaries, but their training. And we can go, if I do that, we can go and have them go through parts of Cornell because it's a state school, right? And I said, okay, so you do that. I'll pick the kids. We'll start training them. So I had a crew of these kids who were just either dropping out of high school or just graduating and had nothing, they had no idea what they were going to do. And not only guys, but girls, we had about a crew of about 8. And they were in this program, and we just kind of slid them all. And I was, got a little salary from that nonprofit, so I could be, Al's working, on these projects, and he's working for the nonprofit. So that's how they could explain my presence. But I was actually saving Gus's butt and his company's, life from, totality of collapse by his moron sons and his Nazi daughter-in-law. So, but she kept the thumb screws on him, but she spent money. I wouldn't doubt if she was skimming off the top. But anyway, I basically worked for him for about 1.5 years, and I cleaned up all the projects that they were in the midst of that were going south, and I made them successful, and probably saved him a couple of $1 million and made him a couple of million more. So he did never, ever, you want some more money? I said, no, what you're giving me is more than generous, right? Because I was spending no more than 20 hours at best a week on these projects, right? Because as soon as I started doing this, I was making friction in that he's just a consultant. But then we set up this other thing about a month later where we brought these kids in, and then it legitimized my presence. And but that town was such a small enough town that I was, again, the dude, because I had my fingers in so many different little pies, the art scene, the poetry scene, out of Cornell. And once I started going to the King Club, started hanging out with all those guys, and the old timers loved it. The old timers. I was 32. They were, like I said, late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and I was close enough they could remember what it was like, so they were starting restaurants and nightclubs and things that they were thinking about, but saying, "Hey, help me out with this." So I was like the party central guy, and I started doing my Friday night parties, and so I could have easily stayed in Ithaca, right? I had a great scene going. The first time we had a what they called lake effect northeaster. It was one day it was 60 degrees. Next day we had 4 feet of freaking snow. It was 9 degrees below zero. It was like, what? And I don't like the cold. And that was one of the motivating factors of me moving out of the farm. So I got at the farm early, spring, lived there all spring, summer, fall, and that first snowstorm. And so what happened was, I did 3 of those farms and was the magic and I got 3 checks from 3 different farmers, one for a big sum of money, the other for what they could afford. But they were still, worth the few hours that I spent. And I put that in that bank account, and the lady who was like the head teller when Mary's husband came to fix their IT one day, she goes, "That guy who lives with you, the miracle farm electrician, you know how much money he makes?" And he goes, "No." Anyway, he finds out how much money I deposited, and that I was depositing, other monies in there, other checks from other people I was doing miracle electric work for, and he goes, and he got, he's friends, he's part of the King Club, and he didn't know it. I didn't tell him anything about anything, right? I was just there and fixing his stuff and watching TV with him. But I was hanging out more because I've been hanging out. I got friends at Cornell. He had gone to school there. He had been in Ithaca his whole life. He had no friends. That was the closest thing to he had a friend. Anyway, so so I got some money in the bank. I get myself my own truck, and I buy it. It's a used truck, but it's a truck that has, it's a contractor's truck, with boxes and big wheels. And it's a great old truck, 1972, great engine, great body. I bought it for $900. One of the guys at the King Club, who said, I got some, car dealer. So I've got some vehicles you might like to look at. I see you driving around that Honda. It's not even yours. I said, yeah, I could use a vehicle. So, he sells me this truck, and he, again, I'm Mr. Motorcycle, at least at that time, gets me a motorcycle. And he also sells me a little MG Sprite, right? For like all 3 vehicles, $1,100, because he couldn't get rid of them. They were just, he like took me, so you need this and you need this and you need that. And how much, what do you want to pay for that? And I said, $1,100. He goes, sold, right? Signed out the thing. And then he sent me his brother, the insurance guy. Bingo. Then I went over to the guy who got me my electric, he sent me to his cousin who ran DMV, like within 6 hours. I owned those trucks, titled those trucks, plated those trucks, insured those vehicles. And I was seeing a girl, right? And she had in Ithaca, a river runs through it, very sacred Indian river, right? And it goes right downtown, goes right to town. And there's a thing called the businessman's lunch, where the businessmen come and sit on these big stones, and the water's rushing down by them, and they have their lunch. Very nice. And the city has built steps so you can get down there real easy. And a number of people over the years have built houses that are like sticking over, the waterfall. And there was a girl at Cornell who was a rocket scientist. I mean, literally a rocket scientist. And I kind of bumped into her, through my boss sent me over to her department to talk at a conference about setting up a database and looking on, statistical analysis of X, Y, and Z. And that was one of my little specialities, looking at trends, right? So I go there, and she was, of all the people there, she was the prettiest woman, that was for sure. And she was not, hiding it either. She was, wearing that's kind of attractive. Anyway, we're at this thing, and we're leaving this conference room, and she goes, "Want to go have lunch?" And I said, "Sure. Where do you want to go have lunch?" And she goes, "Well, we can go to the cafeteria." And I said, "Okay." So we go to the cafeteria, we had a nice lunch. And she goes, "You got a motorcycle, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, I got a motorcycle." She got a truck. She goes, where are you keeping that stuff?" And I said, "Well, I'm living out on this farm, but it's, 30 miles in another county, and it's, 40-mile drive. So, I'd like to find something." She goes, "Well, let me show you something." So she takes me home to her house. And of all the houses that were kind of built over the waterfalls, she actually has a garage, right? Her house is up here, and the road's down here. And so you drive in the garage, and then you walk up the stairs in the house, right? And she goes, "How would you like to rent the garage?" And she goes, "It has its own bathroom, and it's got kind of a little apartment back there, right?" So I look at it and go, "Oh, this is quite nice." And I go, "So," she goes, "So what do you want to pay?" And I said, "I don't know, $300 a month, utilities included." She goes, "Yep, $300. Now I come to find out, once we start living with each other, that she's actually paying 125 for the whole thing. So, but still, 300 for the amount of money I'm making every week is like no. Plus, it's a place I can put my truck, my car, and my motorcycle. And it's got a pretty good shop and a little apartment back there with a shower and a bathroom and a deck that goes out onto the waterfalling, that you can step off, that has steps from the deck down onto a big stone that you can go and go swimming. So for $300, that was pretty good. And so I move in, and I kind of move everything in from the farm. I don't tell Mary and her husband, but I pretty much moved everything in, right? And all the stuff that I had built into my nice little cubby of a place in the barn, I kind of moved all that out too. All the shelves, all the this, all the that. So he never went up there. And so anyway, I, don't come home that often, but I still got, until I moved everything out. I, so one night, I'm there, and he goes, so you bought that truck and that car and that motorcycle, and it was here for a little while. And I said, "Well, I have a friend, and it's a lot easier to just leave in a town, so I don't have to always come out here and switch vehicles." And he goes, "Uh-huh." And he goes, "I went up into your apartment." I said, "Really? Isn't that, crossing the line? I mean, I don't go look at your private stuff." And he goes, "Well, you got nothing there. All you got is a blow-up mattress there. You got nothing. All your stuff is gone." I said, "What stuff did you even know I had?" He goes, "Well, I went in there. It's my farm. I can go anywhere on my farm I want. I said, okay. And he goes, I've heard that you've been working not just at Cornell, but for lots of other people, and you're making you should give me some of that. That farm guy who you fixed, you would have never done that. I said, yes, I would have never done that unless I, put $50,000 worth of energy, time, and rewired your everything. Well, you stayed here. I said, yeah, for 3 months. And I helped you, tile all of your farm. I helped you grow all that and harvest all that stuff. And I helped you and I helped you and I helped you. I saved your life about 4 times from your vomiting of you being drunk all the time. And he goes, well, I thought you were my friend. I said, I am your friend, And he goes, you're just an evil person, just like all the rest. And I said, well, see you later. I just got in my car and my little MGB Sprite and, deflated my, blow up mattress and left nothing there. Right. And about, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later, Mary comes into my office. So you left the farm? I said, yeah, Mary, you're never there. I got tired of babysitting your crazy husband. She goes, yeah, I was just wondering. She goes, I'm amazed that you lasted as long as you did. I said, yeah, well, it was okay for a time. But after a certain point, it's, and she goes, yeah, and I've heard about all the stuff you're doing. So, I don't begrudge you one iota. And he's, I've told him, not to fixate on you or, that, he helped us out amazingly. And, we wouldn't be half where we are, and he wouldn't be half the farmer he is unless you helped him, and you probably would be dead unless, So he wants to, say you're okay. I said, well, you can tell everybody that I'm okay. It's okay. He goes, can you go see him? I said, yeah. You know what? A friend of mine is opening up a pizza parlor, in that old place that used to be a laundromat, right? One of those old guys at the King Club to have a really amazing Italian restaurant that focuses on pizza and keep the laundromat and have a pool hall and a bar because it was a big space, because it had been a commercial laundry with a laundromat, right? So, and, they're going to have the grand opening. So why don't you and homeboy come to that and, we can share a pizza and have a drink and he can, we can shake hands. And she goes, okay. So he does. He goes, you are a good guy. You did save my life, And he just went through this whole list of, and I said, you're a good guy too. And you should realize that, Mary is an amazing woman. You're lucky to have her. I take care of her. I said, you need to take care of her more than that. You need to step up to being the better guy that you are. I've seen it in you. You don't have to drink so much. You don't, and you don't have to stop drinking either, because he would go into these things of, I'm going on the wagon. And then when he'd fall off, it would be like, whoa. I said, why don't you just drink a little, right? Instead of drinking that whiskey, you like beer, come here and have a nice beer. They're making it right there, right? And so he actually, the guy whose dad was rich, who funded all of that, was doing the beer thing, but that wasn't his passion. His passion was being Mr. Chef, right? He had worked at a place in Oregon where he kind of got this idea of having a multi-thing kind of place, and his wife came from Las Vegas, and they were both, hospitality chef people. They met at Cornell's hospitality school, right? And then went off and did things, and then came back and did this. And so that boy, Mary's husband, became their beer guy, and it brought out the better side of him. And so he stayed my friend, right? He stopped being jealous, right? And he had a thing where he didn't have to compete with his dad and, use formaldehyde as his cologne. So he came out to be his better self. And that was an amazing, I don't even know if it was right at the back door of Cornell. So all the kids could just walk down the hill, not through the main gate that was way over there, but they had about 4 different entrances. And this was one of the back sides to go into town. If you wanted to walk into town, came down that road, that path, came out that gate, and you went down. And this had been a worker kind of neighborhood. And this was, a commercial, place to, wash clothes and did stuff for Cornell, and it had been, emptied, not used. They bought the building really cheap, and they fixed it up really nice. And so it was a laundromat you could go to, and in the back of the laundromat, they had pinball machines and video machines. And you went through a door, and there was the bar and the pool hall. And there was a big entrance from the laundromat that had been the industrial entrance into the industrial, clothes washing place. And that was the Italian restaurant. And the building had been built in the 30s, so it was all wood. So the walls were all wood, floor was concrete, and they resurfaced the concrete to, terrazzo kind of look. And it was an amazing, and it too had a big bar. So the pool hall had a bar, the Italian restaurant had a bar, and it was quite amazing. And so that's the end of the story up until now, and I will come back at 6 p.m. and we will do a guided meditation. Let's see. Do I have another pair of glasses? That's and I can't quite read. Didn't even know you were texting here. Let's see. Wait a minute. No. Is that it? Is that all you got there? Let's see. Swedish massage. I deny. I do. That's it. The best living in Sweden since 1989. Emergency number in Swedish with cops, emergency people. There's nothing that's called Swedish massage. Yes, I knew that. And because the Swedish Institute that taught Swedish massage didn't call it Swedish massage. Nothing. This is a massage exists for people, I guess. Yep. Now the best, when I taught massage, I basically taught what was known as shiatsu, or cranial sacral. That was another discipline I taught. And when I started doing counseling, part of that was when I did, couples counseling, I got the people to massage each other. And that was like, there was 3 things. One was I say, so who does all the housework? And if they shared it equally, that was a component of getting along, right? So how well do you guys communicate? And intimacy was my communicate was the term for that. And the third one was you need to give each other massages. So I showed them how to do it and how to release stress. Because most people who are sick today, it's what's called dis-ease, meaning it's a lack of ease. So anyway, I'm getting hungry again. Haven't had lunch. I just had one soft-boiled egg for breakfast. So I'm going to go check on the dog and see how life is going in the rest of things. So that was a good story. of Ithaca, and that was only one little story. I have a dozen of them, of all the crazy stuff we did in Ithaca. And we did a lot of crazy stuff. Boop, boop, boop. And I will probably tell an Ithaca story about Ithaca bucks. Go look up Ithaca bucks. Google Ithaca bucks, right? And I will tell that story in the first 20 minutes of tonight's show before we do guided meditation so enough people show up, and we'll go from there. So I love you all, and I am going to say I'll see you a little later. Do, 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 do.